if the override does not pass, 2.7 million. And what that means is it means 40 layoffs. It means no art, music, PE, no sports. So we'd be losing special education services. We would be basically going down to the minimum amount of funding that the state would allow.
Welcome to So That Reminds Me, Reminder Publishing's bi-weekly podcast discussing Western Mass news. My name is Ryan Feyre.
And I'm Tyler Garnet.
And we'll be your hosts for today's episode. On this week's episode, Tyler and I sat down with Easthampton Mayor Salem Derby to chat about the upcoming $6.9 million override vote on June 9th, which will dictate the future of the city's financial outlook and determine what essential services will be saved and what will be cut. But first, how you doing, Tyler? How's it been?
I'm doing great. Everything's great. I mean, just to kind of get it out of the way as of recording, Knicks play tonight in Game 1, so it's kind of where my head's at. I know a lot of our listeners are probably, Massachusetts-based, probably rooting against the Knicks, but, that's kind of what's been occupying my brain for the last week and a half.
I was trying to avoid this, Tyler. No, it's funny. I feel like I should retire from this podcast because I feel like ever since I joined, the Patriots lost the Super Bowl, which I'm sure you were happy about.
Yes, sorry.
The Red Sox, the Red Sox are floundering still.
Yes.
And now the Knicks are in the NBA Finals for the first time since 1999.
Maybe it is you to thank, Ryan. So maybe we do need you on this podcast more. So I appreciate you. But that's what's going on in my brain. So as this will release, Game 1 would have already happened. So hopefully I'm in a good mood and have a good week and a half, 2 weeks. But that's what's on my brain. How's everything going with you, Ryan?
Good. I'm going to Chicago this upcoming weekend.
Nice.
Going to Wrigley Field for the first time.
Nice.
To see the Cubs. Not trading teams though. I don't want that. I'm still a depressed Red Sox.
Sticking to one Sox.
But going out and exploring the city. I've heard it's a nice city. I've always wanted to go, and I want to explore a lot of the ballparks across the country. So
it's definitely up there, one of the top bucket list ballparks. I think a lot of baseball fans would want to see. So that's going to be awesome. Yeah,
definitely. There's a YouTuber I like who went to all 30.
Oh, nice.
And he ranked Wrigley number 1.
Nice.
So I'm going to see what all the hype's about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that should be a fun time.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for it. That's a big thing going on. But it's in the sports world for me, it's not as illustrious as you. So
hey, listen, I've had a tough 26 years, so if I could just have a good few weeks, that would be really nice for me. But we'll see. I'm cautiously optimistic.
The Knicks have a tall task, and that's quite literally.
Quite literally,
with
I know.
Wembanyama,
So we'll see. I'm sure we'll be back on this podcast in 2 weeks, and I'll give my update if they win or loss, and if I'll be having nightmares about him. So
I do have a funny story. It was Memorial Day weekend. I was watching the Thunder Spurs game with my aunt, who doesn't really watch the NBA.
Yeah.
She hasn't watched it since the 80s when it was like Magic and Larry and all that.
Sure.
So she was watching the game with me for the first it's just her first one of her first NBA games she's watched in forever, and she's just amazed by Wembanyama.
Oh my God, it's incredible.
She's like, what, a 7'3" player that can dribble and shoot and pass? It's like, I've never seen this in my life.
Doesn't have to jump when he dunks.
It was just funny to me because there have been a lot of players that can do that over the years. But it's just funny from that perspective because back in that time, it was just you stayed under the hoop if you were that tall.
Yeah, absolutely. How the game has evolved. I mean, not to get off topic, but I saw the scores from the 99 finals when the Knicks and Spurs last played. Games were ending 79-78.
Oh yeah.
There wasn't a lot of shooting. It was a lot of under the basket kind of scoring. But that is really funny.
But she's a fan now. She's like, I gotta watch this guy next game.
Yeah,
when's the next game?
Yeah, so it's gonna be entertaining.
He's a box office draw. So,
he is.
Be a fun finals though. But moving on, a lot's been going on locally. Here in Western Massachusetts. So we have a couple stories I want to touch on. A lot of them actually all of them are in your community, Tyler, Chicopee. Because the other big thing that's happening in our other colleague Trent Levox's community that we're about to talk about on this podcast. So, but first in Chicopee, I wanted to touch on they're getting a new fire chief. Matthew Cross, who's the current deputy fire chief, will be sworn in at some point in June after current fire chief Daniel Stamborski announced his retirement after 29 years with the department, and he's been chief since 2019. So that was a big story happening in Chicopee. The other big story in Chicopee is the FaceMate property situation, which is considered, what is it, Tyler? It's about to be like the tallest residential building.
Yeah, tallest residential building. Yeah.
So what happened with that? You're at the topping off ceremony.
Yeah. They had the topping off ceremony, topping off ceremony I've personally been to. I wasn't on the beat yet for the Holyoke Veterans Home.
It's very symbolic, right?
It's
more of like a symbolic thing.
Yeah, because I was at the groundbreaking maybe less than a year ago. So when I got this press release, I was shocked to see that it was already done, but
like,
realized it's very symbolic. It's literally just the last beam being put into place. Everyone gets to sign their name on the beam before Rise Up. I actually did get to sign it, so I will be a part of Chicopee for forever, which was really, really nice. Mayor View definitely encouraged me to sign it, so I did. I wasn't the only one. Everyone did, so which was super nice. So it's just a nice little symbolic thing to show the progress of the building. I mean, it has been really quick. I'm sure I'll be at the ribbon cutting in no time. But so they put the last beam in. Progress is going well. I believe the goal is still to finish by next year. So
and it's 105 mixed income affordable housing units, they're calling it. And so it's like 21 one-bedroom, 16 studio, 57 two-bedroom, and 11 three-bedroom. So pretty significant project. Developers are financing the project with $37 million loan from Mass Housing. So
and it's in a great location right by the canal walk, and it's like many communities who have these abandoned mills. It's a former mill site that is actually has been vacant for so many years and is actually getting some nice use, and for housing, which seems to be a big issue.
Yeah, definitely. And then just one other Chicopee thing I want to touch on, which you just reported on, Tyler, was the school committee passed its budget. This seemed to be a little less dramatic than other communities that we've talked about. According to your reporting, there's no lost jobs in the district. But they did eliminate 5 positions that haven't been filled. So it seemed like, from your perspective, I don't know, it seemed pretty run-of-the-mill vote.
Now hearing from all these other communities you cover, and all the writers and the organization cover, kind of just you have your fingers crossed when you see the budget is going to be talked about in the agenda. But this one was good. There was a nice increase in the budget. Like you said, the only positions that were cut were positions that haven't been filled in years, but they're also adding other positions to the budget to kind of replace those. And they have a focus. They made this new needs-based approach, at least in their budget, where they're trying to look. They meet with every school individually, and it's like, where do you need more money to kind of raise some of these programs or services you offer? So it was good to see. I mean, the school committee was happy with it, and so was at least it sounds like the mayor and the president were happy with this. And next is the big budget for Chicopee. So
they'll be voting that along with the rest of the city budget and sometime in June. But so just wanted to touch on Chicopee, because I know we've talked a lot about Holyoke, we've talked a lot about South Hadley. I know Dennis has talked a lot about Springfield, East Meadow, so I want to get some Chicopee in there. But I think we've rambled enough, Tyler. So we'll get to our interview with Mayor Salem Derby right after this break.
Beautiful.
Hey, sports fans. Those incredible action shots you've been seeing in Reminder Publishing's papers? Well, now you can take them home. Reminder Printworks is making your favorite local sports photos available for purchase. The big plays, the big wins, the moments you'll never want to forget. Whether it's your kid's game-winning goal or a hometown champion lifting the trophy, those memories deserve a place on your wall. It's easy to get into the action. Just visit popqr.news/photos and find the shot that means the most to you. Don't let the great memories fade. Get in the game today with Reminder Printworks.
We get it. You're busy, but you want to be connected to your local community. If you're not reading The Reminder, Western Mass's free weekly newspaper, you're missing out on the heartbeat of your town. Stay in the loop with all the latest buzz, from local stories to community updates and exciting events. It's all in The Reminder. Just log on to thereminder.com and dive into the hometown news you love. To subscribe to receive The Reminder at your home, call 413-788-1316. Don't miss a beat. Your town, your stories, your community for over 60 years. The Reminder. We are hometown news.
All right, and we are back. And at time of recording, we're about 5 or 6 days from a major override vote on June 9th in Easthampton. And here to talk about it with us is Easthampton Mayor Salem Derby. Thank you so much, Mayor Derby, for joining us. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm pretty well. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I just want to start, and this is, obviously want to get into the meat of it, but I feel like whenever we talk about override votes and Proposition 2.5, obviously, like, we as journalists know a lot about it, but I feel like there's some confusion sometimes about what it is, from residents. So I kind of wanted to start with, before we get into the big override vote on June 9th, I was wondering if you can kind of tell listeners what Proposition 2.5 is and kind of how it works.
Yeah, so this is, getting to be 40 years old. This was passed in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And, what this was an attempt to, constrain the amount of revenue that municipalities could raise, because I think people, at that time were talking about Massachusetts as Taxachusetts. And it became something that was locked in. And what we found is over the years, it is a very, very terrible mechanism for municipalities. And what I would say is, having a cap is okay, but that cap shouldn't be set at a specific percentage. It should be tied to inflation.
Sure.
Right? Because if we're looking at being able to raise 2.5% on property taxes, that is not even close to keeping up with the 6 to 9% increase in costs across the board, and that's just for like general costs. If we look at things like healthcare, since I became interim mayor last July, we've had a 38% increase in healthcare costs, and we're about to hit another 12.48% increase when we hit July 1st.
Wow.
So municipalities are very limited in the way that we can raise revenue. We have a couple local options: the meals tax, the rooms tax if you have Airbnbs. We don't have any hotels or lodging like that, but we have Airbnbs, so we can get some money from that. And then the local option cannabis tax. That's about it.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have other levers to pull to raise revenue. And so our only option is to use a 2.5 override to help our revenue keep up with our expenses.
Gotcha. Maybe you kind of answered our next question, but, we were also kind of wondering, I'm sure there's been a lot of decisions made over the years and also a lot of factors going into it, but, how did Easthampton kind of get to this point where an override is needed to save some of these essential services?
I think a lot of this goes back to COVID. With COVID came the CARES and FEMA money, and then the ARPA money. And, what happened was those monies were used to help us grow our reserve funds. So we have stabilization funds, like rainy day funds.
Sure.
So a lot of the things, that were expenditures from the city got supplanted by those funds. And then some of that money was diverted into our reserve funds. And then there kind of just became like, oh, we have all this money. And so, certain areas, and rightly so, like, for example, our schools, we started some new really important programs, like, a special ed program to keep kids in our high school who might have, neurodivergent things that might have to go, they might have before had to go out of district, which costs us a lot of money.
Sure.
So bringing that into the school was great, but it costs the city, right? At the end of the day, you're going to pay either way.
Yes.
But so I think it's kind of starts with that. And then about 2 years ago, the former administration decided to use about $1.8 million of stabilization funds to balance the budget. And I was on the city council at the time, so I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't part of this.
Of course.
But really what was told to us and what was done was that free cash, which is what the money that you have from new growth and local receipts and all those things at the end of the year, was going to be used to replace that money. So it wasn't like we were creating a structural deficit.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, that happened. Last year, the administration needed to use more. So they took $4 million out of stabilization. They took $400,000 out of overlay, which is basically for the assessor's office. If you get sued from someone's valuation, that money is there to kind of, and we had never gotten sued for it. So that money was there. She used $400,000 from that, and then $100,000 from tax rate stabilization. So that was $4.5 million of one-time funds. They got used to balance the budget. Now, what we were told as city councilors was that money was going to be replaced.
Yeah.
And we believed it because it had happened the year before.
Of course.
Then about a month later, the previous mayor left and I became interim mayor.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, where's the plan to get this money back? Well, there is not a plan. And then we got hit with an 20% increase in health insurance. And that was right when I became, so that was July 1. And then we got hit in October, 18% increase in health insurance. And then we had out-of-district placements for the school district. Huge amount of money. And so all of these kind of unanticipated costs started to add up. And I'm like, there's no way we're backfilling this deficit. So, really what it became was a $4.5 million structural deficit. And then one of the other compounding factors here was this winter, as you remember, was pretty prolific.
Yes.
We had a lot of snow, a lot of snow clearing.
Yes.
So we ended up, spending close to $800,000 on snow removal. That's big.
Yeah.
We had budgeted $200,000.
Wow.
So then we had to spend an additional $580 some odd thousand to kind of. So what we found was that we were not going to be able to bridge this gap, and we had to go for an override.
Yeah. So the override that residents are voting on June 9th is a $6.9 million. What kind of how did you kind of land on that number specifically? Because we see a lot of communities that are facing similar situations, and there's a lot of different numbers thrown out. For Easthampton, what made you kind of land on that number specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about a lot of other communities, so 57 in Massachusetts are going for an override this year. 57. When I sit down with my colleagues, they are like, we just went through an override. They're either going through an override or they're planning on doing an override next year. So, I think that speaks to a larger issue. But as far as reaching the 6.9 number, I convened a budget task force. We did a 5-year projection, a 10-year projection, and looked at what did the structural deficit mean to the city and how did we fix it, get on stable ground. What we found was that we needed about $8.5 million to really get ourselves on stable footing that would give us, 5 to 10 years of full stability. There's no way that was going to fly.
Yeah.
$8.5 million is significant. So what we did was we said, okay, listen, we're not going to ask our residents to pay the full amount. We will step up, and the royal we, the city, and tighten our belts. We'll make cuts either way. So, it's the question of, is it devastating cuts with no override, or is it, cuts that are going to allow us to control our spending, to make efficiencies, to get on a stable footing, and really kind of plan forward for the next decade. Now, gosh, I really hope that the state steps up between now and the next 10 years to help cities and towns fund the operations that we have in a more meaningful way. But, this 6.9 is a compromise. It's a compromise where everybody is going to have sacrifice. It's a shared sacrifice number.
Yeah, no, of course. And, kind of from an essential services perspective, what are some of the ramifications if the vote passes, and what are some of the ramifications if the vote does not pass? Yeah,
I mean, so there are ramifications both ways. So if it doesn't pass, we're still going to be cutting almost $1 million out of the school district. So there's going to be programs that we were planning on getting going. There's going to be, staffing changes. So $1 million is a big cut. In a normal year, that would be huge. It would be, but if the override does not pass, $2.7 million. And what that means is it means 40 layoffs. It means no art, music, PE, no sports. So we'd be losing special education services. We would be basically going down to the minimum amount of funding that the state would allow. And that is devastating for our schools. And it's devastating for our kids. It's devastating for our families. It's devastating for our property values. And so that's one piece. And then if you look at fire department, that's another piece where we'd be losing 3 positions from the fire side. And that would have an impact on our services to be able response time. There'd be times when there's nobody in the fire station. If they have to, an ambulance goes out to Bay State, they are going to have to bring people back on overtime. That's going to cost us money. We're just not going to have the same sort of response time that we do now. In fact, over the last 6-7 years, we've been able, there's something called the ISO, which is the insurance rating. So your homeowner's insurance is partially based on this number. And Easthampton was a 5 out of 10. So we were middle of the road. And the lower you go, the better. So we recently got upgraded to a 3.
Okay.
So that means that people's homeowners insurance started to go down. So if we aren't able to fully fund the fire department, that number is probably going to go back up to a 5 or beyond, which means that homeowners are going to have to pay more for homeowners insurance. On the police side, we're going to be losing 2 police officers that are post-certified, that are young, like really amazing officers that are, really, one of the things we pride ourselves is in hiring really great people because people want to come to Easthampton. And so losing that is going to have an impact on, we're not going to have proactive traffic patrols. It's going to impact investigations. It's going to have an impact across the board. And, I would say Council on Aging is going to have to close on Fridays. We're not going to have the services that we normally would have available to our senior citizens. The library is going to be affected. And so we would bring them down to the minimum amount of funding that is required by the state for them to get grants. And, City Hall is going to be affected. So we're going to have a 2-hour across the board staffing reduction for everybody. That means if you go in to pay your tax bills, there's less likely to be somebody there because, people are going to be working less because we have to make these cuts. And then finally, DPW, I guess not finally. We had the parks too, but DPW is going to have an impact on like our essential services for clearing roads, for fixing, potholes and those types of things. And then Parks and Rec. That's going to affect our beautiful. We have Nonotuck Park. We have other parks and graveyards around the city that we maintain, and we're not going to be able to do that as well. Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty significant across the board.
Yeah, it sounds it.
Yeah, and it's just also too. What about kind of the resident impact if it, if this fails or if it passes? Like, what's kind of the resident impact on that side of things too?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you are a resident, so I'm going to say this, and I've said this every single day. I feel like you're going to pay either way. Yeah. Like no matter what, you're paying. So what does that mean? It means that if it passes, then you're going to have to pay an increase in your taxes, right? And that is going to vary. If you're in the median house, that's $418,000 in Easthampton. It'd be $1,100 a year roughly. It'd be like $99 a month. $3.29 a day. Yeah. So you're going to pay, but you'll know what you're going to pay. Right. If it doesn't pass, you're going to pay because your homeowner's insurance could go up. You're going to have a reduced response time if you have an emergency. Your roads are not going to get cleared as effectively. You're going to have a lower quality of life. And I would say this, one of the biggest drivers of property values is quality of school. And they estimate that as a school's quality goes down, and this is going to happen if we make $2.7 million worth of cuts, the school's quality is going to go down. We're going to lose people that are choicing in. We're going to have people choice out. It's going to be kind of a snowballing effect. That is going to impact people's property values anywhere from 2 to 8%. A 2% decrease on the $418,000 home is $8,333, right? That's significant. That's way bigger and that's every year. And that's way bigger than the $1,000 that you might pay. Right. So again, you're going to pay either way. It's just whether you pay up front or whether you pay on the back end with increased costs and reduction of services.
Of course, and we kind of talked about obviously the residents' impact, the essential services impact, and you mentioned you pay either way. But kind of looking at the short-term and long-term financial situation within the city, how would that look if an override kind of passed?
Yeah, so I mean, if the override passes, that's going to get us to a place where we can really reassess and make efficiencies and have a stable footing. So regardless, we're making cuts, right? So either way, we're making cuts. Yeah. It's just whether the cuts are sustainable or not, right? So if we get the override, we can make cuts that are going to allow us to move forward into the future without this huge reduction of essential services, which will allow us to keep things stable and moving in the right direction. We're still going to look at consolidating departments, look at regionalization, look at all of these new revenue opportunities. We're going to look at all of these different ways that we can kind of keep Easthampton as vibrant and up and coming as it is. Now, if it fails, that is going to put us into a very kind of dire situation where, again, the schools will be a snowballing effect. Yeah. We're going to potentially have to look at another round of layoffs mid-year, depending on how our revenue is coming in. But it's not going to allow us a stable platform to keep moving forward. We're basically going to be in triage mode.
And as you kind of mentioned, Mayor Derby, like anytime you have to cut positions, it's always a difficult thing to do. And I wanted to focus in on the schools a little bit because I know our colleague Trent Lavakis covered the last school committee meeting, and where Superintendent Michelle Balch kind of unveiled what's going to happen if the override fails or if it passed. And I wanted to ask, like, what kind of went into those discussions about, like, those decisions of, like, what would need to be cut if this happens or if this happens? Like, what kind of went into those discussions of deciding that?
So, one of the interesting things about the school finance is, like a lot of those decisions, because the school is like a separate entity that operates within the city. So a lot of those discussions were coming from the superintendent's office. And, as a member of the school committee finance team, I'm kind of tangentially in on those discussions, but really those discussions came from the school department with the superintendent talking to the principals, talking to the key stakeholders. And so I was less involved in that part, but, obviously as being part of the finance committee for the schools, it was presented to us, and they did a lot of thoughtful reflection and discussion on how they were going to make these cuts. But it's kind of an untenable situation. Like, every angle of it is kind of terrible, so it was not easy for them. And I know that, as this moves forward, it's going to continue to be difficult, because even if it passes, there's still going to be reductions.
Yeah, and I'm sure similar conversations were had within the city. Like you mentioned, the police department, DPW, I'm sure it was not easy to do any of that.
And that was more coordinated by my office. So this budget cycle was tough. And the reason it was tough was because we ended up having to make 3 budgets. So when we first got into this, like, we knew that our budget situation was pretty tight. So what we did was we said, okay, what is it going to cost to do level services? And so that was the first budget round. We sat down with all the department heads, said, okay, here's level services. And then we took our revenue and we compared it. We're like, whoa, we got a big gap here. Yeah. And so then we said, all right, now make every cut you can possibly make without cutting personnel. And so that was the second round. Gotcha. And so then we said, lined it up. This is not going to work. And then we got we closed the books from last fiscal year, and we realized that this deficit was significantly deeper than we thought. And that's when we said we have to go for an override. And now we have to do an override budget, so a third budget. So in the time frame that most municipalities do one, we did 3. Jeez. And that was an exercise, and it was my first budget. Creating. It was my treasurer's first budget, and so a lot of us, we had a big learning curve here. Sure. But I feel like we've been, even though it's difficult times, like I want to give my finance team a shout out, because they did a really great job. Like, we pulled it together. We got it done. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Mayor Derby, you kind of mentioned this earlier in the podcast about the state kind of stepping in some capacity to help ease the burden on communities. Is there any is there any do you think, what specifically do you think the state could do to kind of help ease some of these financial burdens? Is it kind of change the Proposition 2.5 kind of formula that you were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we need to look at 2.5. We need to tie it to inflation. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the solutions, right? The other one is UGA, which is unrestricted governmental aid. That needs to be increased, I think, significantly for all 351 cities and towns. More local option taxes. Here's something I propose, and the liquor lobby is going to come after me, but if I had 10 cents for every poured alcoholic drink in the city, we would not be in this situation. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, why do we charge an excise tax for cannabis, which that brings me about $300,000 a year, but we don't for alcohol. Yeah. If I ask my public safety guys, all right, what are you responding to more, alcohol-related issues or cannabis-related issues? Sure. 100% alcohol-related issues. Sure. So I think that's something that should be proposed and looked at. It's something I would get behind 100%. And at the end of the day, the markup on alcohol, you're talking about a keg of beer. The markup is pretty significant. Yeah. I mean, you're paying $8-9 for a 16-ounce glass. Yeah. So you that's a good markup. You could probably take 10 cents out of that and not feel it too much. Yeah. So, at the end of the day, I think that there are some creative ways for us to do this. I think another thing that really needs to get looked at is communities like us with big nonprofits that consume a lot of services and pay nothing. That needs to be re-examined. It really does, especially when these big institutions have massive endowments, $70 million to $1 billion. Like they are buying properties in the city, taking them off the tax rolls. And then they have people living in those houses that have children that are using services, right? Like, and a lot of those children are choicing out to other school districts. And guess who pays for that? The city pays for that. So what you have is you have the poorest people in the city paying for the richest people. And we should, like, the poorest people should not be subsidizing the richest people. That seems like it should be the other way around.
The excise tax idea is interesting, especially for Easthampton, which has like a big bar scene.
We do.
Yeah. So
we got the Bermuda Triangle on Cottage Street.
Yeah. So that's an interesting idea. Didn't think of that one.
And we have 3 breweries.
Yeah. True.
So you could definitely get some money's worth for sure. And
we're trying to get new restaurants as well. Like because at the end of the day, part of this is about like figuring out new ways to bring revenue into the city. So one of the things I did early on was request that we get 8 liquor licenses from the state, because if we have 8 liquor licenses, if you want to open a restaurant, you can do that, because you can't open a restaurant just with food alone. The markup on food is not good enough. You need to have a liquor license. So we're trying to explore creative ways to bring new development into the city. And so I'm going to leave no stone unturned on that one.
Sure. And, kind of as we've mentioned, I'm sure as many of the listeners have seen, Easthampton's not the only community who's going through something like this. Either, I cover South Hadley, so they kind of just went through this. They're still going through it. There's a lot going on. There's many other communities who have said this might happen in the near future. So kind of going off that, is there any collaboration, or do you, as an administration team, do you guys look at other communities, and did that go into any of the decision making, whether it was for the override or for future collaboration to kind of help, with this deficit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we actually studied quite a few other communities to try to decide, like, do we go for a tiered override? Do we do multiple numbers? Do we do a single number? Do we, like, what are the strategies that we can use? And really, because we had a short time frame. And, what we decided was we wanted to keep it simple. Because what we found was in other communities, having more than one number confused people. They didn't know, well, you vote for both, and if both pass, like, you pay double, and so that was a confusing thing. So we studied that, and we realized we're going to go for one number. We're going to try to make this like the right number. It's not what we need, but it's somewhere in the middle. And as far as collaboration, it's really important. I think there's only 47 mayors in the state of Massachusetts. And I try to be really active in the Mass Municipal Association's Mayor Association, because that is so helpful to be able to sit with peers and talk about things that they've done and things that have worked for them. And in fact, I caught a lot of heat because I actually missed the first finance hearing on the budget because I was at a conference, and I was literally at the time when the city council was giving me a bunch of grief for not being there. Which was, I had someone there for me, and I was sitting at a table with 7 other mayors, literally talking about their experience with the override. Some of them had passed, some of them hadn't, some of them were going through exactly what I was going through at that moment, and I can't tell you how valuable that was. So like being able to collaborate and talk to peers, I've started, like, I'm doing whatever I can, and it's like, which doesn't matter on Facebook, by the way. Like, I'm doing nothing. I'm doing whatever I can because I really care about the city that I live in, where I pay tax. Which I think gets lost on some people. Like, this is my community too. Right. So I've been going to professional development around budgets. I've been doing webinars. Like, I am learning everything I possibly can about the municipal budgeting process to make sure that I'm doing right by the citizens of Easthampton. So I've gone to MFGOA conferences, which is like the Mass Financial governing agency. So they do trainings. I've gone to 2 of those where I am literally the only mayor in the room. It's all treasurers and auditors, and like, I'm trying to get into a level that is deeper than what a traditional mayor would go into.
Well, going off of that, through Trent's reporting, I've noticed that it seems like, a lot of the public comments been people stepping up, sharing their experiences and saying, like, yes to the override. And then there's also, I think 9 city unions came together on Monday to express their support for the override. What has on your end, Mayor, what has the response been from the community? Like, what has the interactions been like since this announcement kind of came to the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, like, so we've done 2 budget hearings, and we did one last night. It was interesting.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit unexpected, honestly. When you talk to people and you get to like in real life and tell them about what's at stake and tell them about what's going on, they have this epiphany, and they you know, I've been getting a lot of positive responses from people when we can talk in person. There's going to be people that are like, no matter what, there's like not a chance. But you know, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. I think there's a lot of people that really deeply care about the community and understand that this is a sacrifice for their pocketbook that probably is going to be worth it in the long run. But again, you know, I'm trying to stay off of Facebook because if you go there, it's a different level of it's a different world. And I also, you know, I'm not going to use Facebook as a litmus test for whether this is going to pass. I think when my experiences with people in person have been very positive. So I'm going to, you know, for my own sanity, I'm just going to go with that.
Yeah, smart. And, you know, as of recording, we're 6 days away from the vote on June 9th. So what are the next steps in the budget process following the override vote? Yeah,
so we're waiting. So we've gotten through all the finance committee meetings. Where the finance committee is talking about making some cuts, which they haven't expressed to the mayor's office, so we don't know what they're planning. So they're going to make a final vote. And then I think they're going to wait until the override passes or the override vote happens. I'm being, again, cautiously optimistic.
Sure.
And to see where they're going to cut and what they're going to do. And then they will, you know, present that to the full council, and then the full council vote to approve the budget or not. And so that's kind of where we are. You know, our budget forms are done. We're going to be trying to, like, I'm right now putting together some ideas to put out some videos that are informational. You know, our department heads are doing information sessions. We're really trying to get the word out. Like, what does this mean? So, you know, I would say the next few days, I mean, we're coming up. It's going to be, we're down to the wire. You know, so there's not a lot. Last night was the big budget forum. It was well attended. And basically had a lot of department heads come and talk about what this meant for their budget. So I'm hoping people will be able to see that. That's going to be posted online. I think it already is posted online. And, you know, this is the final push. So we'll see what we can get.
Well, Mayor Derby, thank you so much for joining us today on our podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this at all?
You know, I feel like I did, but now it's escaping me.
Yeah,
so,
no.
You know, I would just say that, you know, I would encourage people to stay off of Facebook for your information and to reach out to the city website, to email, to talk to department heads. They're all making themselves available to see and what the actual impacts are. And I would also say that if you want to know what this would cost for you specifically, you can go to easthamptonma.gov, and you would just go up to the search bar and override tax calculator. And that will get you just enter your address, and it'll tell you exactly how much the increase in your tax would be. One last thing I think is worth mentioning that sometimes gets lost is if we get a $6.9 million override, and somehow the state comes up and gives us some money, and we realize that we only need $4.5 million, and the override passes, we are not going to tax up to the $6.9 million. We'll only tax to the $4 million. And what that'll do for us is it'll give us something called excess capacity in the levy. And so the next year, if we find that we need a little bit of extra wiggle room, we can go up above that, you know, so we'll have some room to be able to increase the tax levy. A great example is Westfield. So, you know, we're bound by 2.5% each year. Westfield this year raised their property taxes 4% because they had excess levy capacity. So they were not bound by 2.5%.
Gotcha.
So that actually would work out really well for us because then people's taxes wouldn't go up as much as they think they might. And, you know, we can kind of really be measured using that excess capacity. So we could use it over multiple years to try to like keep up with the level of spending and increases in spending.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Go Local is your guide to the best in Western Massachusetts and Northern Connecticut. In the June issue, we're shining a spotlight on 3 incredible locally owned businesses making a real difference in their communities. Ludlow Coffee is brewing more than just great drinks. It's becoming the heartbeat of a neighborhood, one cup and community gathering at a time. In Springfield, Mindful Necessities is bringing herbal wellness and a commitment to whole community health right to your doorstep. And in Summers, Mario's Pizza is proudly marking 5 years as the go-to spot for families and pizza lovers, a true neighborhood staple worth celebrating. 3 businesses, 3 communities, one common thread, a passion for the place they call home. And if you're a business ready to tell your story, reach out to Sales Manager Scott Green at 413-525-6695.
And we are back from our interview with Mayor Salem Derby. How about you, Tyler? I thought it went well. I think Mayor Derby offered a lot of information as far as, what the ramifications are if this override doesn't pass, or if it does pass, how the state can help more, how the future looks financially for them. So I thought it was a pretty fruitful interview. I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really informative as well. I'm sure for hopefully the residents and any of the listeners, because like we mentioned, this is not the only community in Massachusetts that is going through something like this. But I'm sure he's been in multiple meetings over the last few months going through this, so he had tons of information to offer, so that was always good. It always helps. And it's tough to hear that no matter which way the vote goes, that there's going to be some cuts regardless. Obviously, if the vote passes, they're able to save some essential services and still lessen the impacts overall in the city, but that is to be seen come June 9th.
The discrepancy for schools specifically, it's I don't know if I said in the interview, but it was $922,000 of cuts if it passes. That's if it passes.
Jeez.
And it's $2.7 million if it doesn't pass, and that's only in schools. So pretty significant. And the other thing that stuck out to me was the amount of municipalities that are facing this, which is over 50. Facing a situation like this, and we're going to see more communities. Northampton's going to face an override vote next year, most likely, according to their mayor. We've dealt with South Hadley numerous times on this podcast.
Yes.
I'm sure other communities are forecasting a similar situation. So it's just, it is an unfortunate situation. I wonder if there will be a reckoning at the state level at some point. I don't know what it's going to take, but
it's always good. It was good to ask him just a little bit about Proposition 2.5, because obviously I didn't know anything about it when I first started this job, and now obviously that word kind of gets thrown around in every municipality or every budget cycle, and you hear from residents about it. So Mayor Derby explained it pretty well, that kind of limits you a little bit with some of the spending. So could there be a look at the formula? Maybe, especially with all these other communities going through it. But something has to change, and whatever that may be, because a lot of communities, and like you said, the schools take up a lot of the budget in most towns and cities. So they're the ones who get impacted the most, and that's one of the more important things in the city. Yeah,
and I'm with you. I'm glad he explained Proposition 2.5, because even though it's been around forever, it seems like I do think there are residents out there that don't understand. I mean, I didn't understand it, when I first started this job. So it's it is good to explain, because it can be confusing. I think we even talked about, Tyler, after the South Hadley election in April, that there some residents were kind of confused about the situation still, And it probably does stem from something like Proposition 2.5, which I think is good that it's explained. So just so residents know what the hell they're voting on. Come June 9th.
exactly. And he kind of alluded to, obviously Facebook and social media in general is usually not the greatest place to get information. That's where a lot of misinformation could be spread. So, any of the listeners and stuff, I think, like he mentioned, it's important to, just reach out directly to the department heads, to the mayor, to anyone, watch all these meetings that take place, because that's where you'll get the best information. I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other, just looking at
Yes.
Yes, and of course, besides that, read the reminder papers, and obviously check out the website for any past and future editions as well, because we have a lot of great writers who follow all these situations with up-to-date reports.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Budget season's almost over. It's almost at the end.
Yeah.
Almost seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But just for Easthampton residents out there, if you're listening, June 9th is the override vote. It is a crucial vote for the city. So, yeah. But I think that'll do it. That'll do it for another episode of So That Reminds Me. Thank you so much for listening. And we will be back for another episode in a couple weeks.
Thanks for listening to So That Reminds Me, produced by Western Massachusetts news source Reminder Publishing. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, find the latest news at thereminder.com, and follow Reminder Publishing on Instagram at Reminder Publishing, on X at The Reminder MA, and on Facebook. Reminder Publishing, we are hometown news.